Welcome to the intersection of Black culture and horticulture with your girl, Cola B talking. And guess what, y'all? We Black in the garden. From WABE Studios, Soil Cousins, welcome back to another episode of Black in the Garden, the intersection of Black culture and horticulture, where we don't just play in the dirt, we thrive in it. As the seasons change and we look forward to the fall, I want to help you all grow smarter and not harder with my co-host here, Joshua, aka Plant Zaddy. Tell them a little bit about you and how you got here.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, it's great to be here with you once again.
As always.
But Plant Zaddy is here for all horticulture, mostly house plants, but we really want to encourage individuals to really boost their green thumb and understand the therapeutic aspects, what they can do for you, the environment, but
That's
just
it.
always having some sort of beautification in your space.
Yes.
But yeah, we want to, be here for the people, the plant fam, and get in today's episode.
So today we're going to dive into a topic that's got more layers than a teased bang in the 80s. Okay. Fall planting. Because my bangs was epic, okay? But we're going to help our uninitiated soil cousins to understand what to plant in the fall by your hardiness zones. And don't worry, we're going to explain all these fancy terms that some of you may not have heard before. But for some of us, fall is that sweet spot where you sip on pumpkin spice lattes, and you plant cool weather crops. But make sure you check out our Dark Side of Pumpkin Spice episode for a deep dive on that particular spice blend, which is the blend of the season. And before we go any further, let me just share a little bit about my origin story, my gardening journey, if you will, which started in Jacksonville, Florida, where the warm weather feels like it never really leaves. Pun intended. That's it. I was spoiled by long growing seasons. And honestly, I didn't have a clue what I was doing at first. I was just out there, #intuitive gardening. No plan, no strategy, just vibe.
But sometimes that's the best setup for success.
Growing up, I always remember wanting to do stuff that I never tried before. Mm-hmm. And instead of reading an instruction manual or getting instructions, I needed to know how to try to do it myself. So it wasn't until I got really serious about growing the right things at the right time that I really paid attention to that cute little colorful map that you see on the back of the seed packets. Are you familiar with that?
Absolutely not, but we about to be.
Okay, let's get into it. It's a visual representation of your hardiness zones. That's when it all started to make sense. But here's the thing. So when I moved further north, I found out that it got a little bit awkward with the adjustment of understanding, okay, now how do I plant in this climate that I'm in that is different? I started in Florida. Figuring out how to grow in my climate became my first serious lesson in gardening. And it's one that I'm excited to share with you all today because we're going to talk about fall planting.
So before we go on to the next segment, for our viewers and listeners and myself, what exactly are hardiness zones?
I thought you'd never ask.
Yes.
Picture this. The USDA hardiness zone, if we're being cute, is kind of like the sorting hat for your gardening region.
Okay.
If you're into Harry Potter, you got that. But let's go a little bit further with it. We're going to break it all the way down. It divides the United States into different zones, right?
Okay.
And so it's based on like the average minimum temperature, especially as we have what we call our last frost date and our first frost date. Mm-hmm. So you want to not plant too much too close to your first frost date because that's when it's going to freeze over for the first time coming out of the fall, getting into the winter.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And then your last frost date is when we can expect that the cold season is ending. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So based on those two terms, depending on where you are, climate change is definitely having an impact on it, but we're going to get to that later. But yeah, those are things to know as far as understanding how the hardiness zones are calculated. And this helps gardeners and farmers who are planting outside to figure out which plants are most likely to survive and to thrive in their specific climate.
Okay.
So a spoiler alert for if you're trying to grow pineapples in Alaska, This map will gently suggest otherwise, although I do encourage experimentation. If you're like me, you might have first encountered the concept of hardiness zones by just staring at that map on the back of the seed packet. That's what I was doing. I was just like, oh, this is cute, but like, what does it really mean? I'm wondering, where in the world was I fitting in? You may be wondering, where do you fit in on this map? Maybe your place, as you're looking at it, because it's kind of small, is not apparent. So let's just break it down by region. And I'm also going to provide you all with some resources so that you can figure out where you're gardening from on this map. Let's start with zones 3 through 5.
Okay, y'all take out your notes because we're going to get into some details.
Hello. These are some of the cooler regions in the country. That's where the growing season is shorter because we have more cold time than warm time. You know, hate that for y'all. Can't relate. And the winters can be downright frosty. If you're in states like Minnesota, Wisconsin, or Maine, you're definitely in this group. But don't worry, you're not alone. There's also parts of Montana, upstate New York, Vermont, and even a good chunk of Colorado that fall into these zones as well.
And I think the first thing that comes to my mind when looking at this map is longitude and latitude.
Yes.
And just for viewers, longitude would be north
and south, those lines on the
correct.
Map, on the equator.
And latitude would be horizontally, laying the foundation, latitude and longitude.
Right. So the hardiness zones are going off of the latitude, right? Those are the lines that go east to west. I get those terms mixed up. If you're anything like me, come on now, just give me a break. But but the east to west lines are also parallel with the line of the equator. And so the closer that you get to the equator, the warmer that it gets. So what you're noticing as we're talking about these numbered zones is that the higher the number is, the closer to the equator.
The longer warmth
and
period
longer
you have,
warm
yes.
seasons. That's right. But we will definitely list, geographic regions so you can keep up in that way. So in zones 6 through 7, this is where things start to warm up a bit. You can still get a nice mix of all 4 of the seasons, but think about states like Kentucky, Virginia, and Tennessee. Now, if you're gardening in North Carolina, Missouri, Oklahoma, or Arkansas, you are also in this transitional zone. You've got a bit more flexibility with your planting, and fall can be an especially rewarding time to get things growing. And so we're going to move on to zones 8 through 10 if you're ready.
I'm ready.
Okay. So this is where it really starts to heat up. These warmer regions are home to states like Texas, Florida, and Georgia.
Shout out Georgia.
That's where we're recording, where the growing season is long and the fall feels more like a second summer. These states are what fall into this range, making fall planting a whole different ball game. And finally, if you're ready, we're going to get into the tropical zones.
Okay, a little vacation time.
11 through 13, tropical and subtropical, if you will, okay? Where winter is just a mild suggestion rather than a full-on season, and it must be nice. If you're in southern Florida, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, or even the southernmost parts of Texas and California, you're in this group, and you're probably sweating. The growing opportunities are nearly endless, but you'll have to keep an eye on those tropical pests and occasional heavy rains.
I guess my question is, how do you find out which zones you're actually in? Because thinking of how I've moved throughout my life, I've been in multiple different zones and didn't even know.
There are a few ways to find your zone, and I want to help y'all with a few resources. So let's just get into that, because this is definitely one of the easier parts of the game. Once you know for where you are, you don't have to kind of refigure it out.
You know how to react.
Correct. Now, climate change is definitely affecting some of these areas and how the borders can change or the timing can change, but we're going to get to that a little bit later. So you can also hop online and ask your good auntie Google. That's Aunt Google. If you know, you know, because we always talk about Google that way on the podcast. But you can ask about the USDA hardiness zone map. You just put that in the little search box, pop in your zip code, and boom. You'll know exactly where you stand. If you're feeling fancy, you should explore microclimates, because you can be in one place that indicates that this is the zone and things grow in this way, but maybe you're near a mountain or a large body of water or something like that. It can create a quirky little weather pocket, and it may affect your garden within your zone. Also consider if you may be near like the ocean, you know? Let's be real. Mother Nature loves a good plot twist.
She does.
You know this. And another option to pursue in case you find yourself in a place that makes you uncertain about which zone to claim. Google your local extension office, right? Get that number, get off the internet. It's time to go outside. Maybe you can even go visit them, but at least give them a call. I feel like the extension office is so underutilized by so many who are trying to grow things. And a fun fact about the extension office is we have George Washington Carver to thank for that. Because when he was going around during his time and he was helping farmers to understand how to like recover and replenish some soil that had been depleted, that was literally kind of like setting the groundwork, the framework for how the extension offices operate. So when I explain the rest of this to you, then you'll understand it a little bit better. But remember the GOAT, George Washington Carver, whenever you call them. And you can talk to a local and seasoned master gardener in your community who is a volunteer. So this is free 99.
I was about to say, this is free?
It's free. Okay. Yes. And they have office hours for answering your gardening questions or your farm questions. They are local. Yes, I did say local. Yes, I did say free. And they can answer most of the questions that you might have about growing where you are. You get a whole list. They just love giving you resources. So make sure that you reach out to them, especially if you've never reached out to them before. Maybe there are questions that they can answer that you don't even realize that you have, including what in the world is my hardiness zone?
I mean, knowledge is power at the end of the day. So even if you aren't growing, it's always good to know what zone that you are in.
Absolutely. Just talk to them nice, give them a call, and see what kind of helpful resources and insights they can give you to advance your gardening journey and help you feel confident to plant in the fall. All right. So now that we're all zoned in, you see what I did there? Are you ready to talk about the things that we can plant this fall?
Absolutely. That's the most important part.
Okay. So we understand hardness zones. All right. We understand microclimates.
Absolutely.
Longitude and latitude even. We're learning stuff. So it definitely depends on where you're digging. First up, let's start with zones 3 through 5. And we're just talking about the continental United States here. So shout out to our soil cousins in Minneapolis, Buffalo, and Denver. Those of you in those cooler regions, you should understand that you have a limited window. But don't worry, we do have you covered with some things that you can plant. Think about your garlic, your spinach, your kale. They just sound so delicious. Some tough as nails perennials, which are plants that
come back on a yearly basis.
Correct. They come back. You plant them outside in particular, and you can depend on them dying back in the winter. And it's also kind of like one of those natural indicators of, hey, spring is here.
It's time.
Yeah, the perennials are popping back out. You know, they're ready to be outside again.
And on the other side of that, there's an annual that you have to replant every year.
That's
and
it.
The roots definitely die under the ground. But perennials, it's kind of like a holding zone.
So if you like a pop of color, consider planting some resilient perennials like echinacea or sedum. And here's a pro tip to extend your growing season. Try row covers or cold frames.
There's another term.
Okay.
So row
questions?
covers, let
Yes.
me ask. I've seen, of course, the land of farmers. And I'm assuming that this is like a cloth that you maybe put over rows to protect them.
Well, the main word here is cover. You're just covering those rows because you're kind of giving like a little bit of insulation to the plant so that they're not getting like that direct wind, and it's kind of like adding a few degrees to that insulated, that tent. You're covering
protecting
the
it from
rows.
frost, things of that nature. Okay.
Yeah. And also cold frames work in a very similar way. It's just a different type of structure that is like, it looks kind of like a little greenhouse. It can be on the ground. It can even be in ground, but it typically has a door where you can close it. And maybe, you know, if it's snowing or something like that and you don't want that to get on your plants, you have that kind of protection. So just trust me, your spinach will thank you when you take those precautions. And as we're moving on to zones 6 through 7, I'm looking at you, Charlotte, Louisville, and Nashville. Those are our transitional regions. You guys get the best of both worlds. You get just enough warmth and a nice amount of chill, but just a little bit. Perfect for growing your root veggies like your carrots, your beets, leafy greens. Our black plant fave.
Which was an amazing episode.
Okay.
Because collards,
you can plant those. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
You can plant lettuce, even some aromatic herbs like rosemary and thyme. But just remember to mulch like it is your job, because nobody likes frostbitten plants. What are you doing all that work for if the winter just gonna eat them up and just freeze them up, you know? So make sure that you are taking these precautions. Now, about the area where I started my growing journey. All right. Remember, Florida, Jacksonville, North Florida, zones 8 through 10 is what we're kind of zooming in on right now, where it is still warm enough to break a sweat while gardening well into December. Ask me how I know. Our soil cousins across the interstate of 10. Remember, we were talking about that latitude line? We're thinking about that particular zone that highway is in, and that is 8 through 10, right? And so fall is the time to shine with brassicas like broccoli and cauliflower, and cool weather greens like arugula, and collards and root crops like radishes and turnips. And you might even be able to get in a second round of planting before the winter really sets in. But just make sure that you are pacing yourselves. You know, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. The garden life is one that takes patience, you know, so we encourage that. And finally, for those who are lucky enough to be gardening in zones 11 through 13, shout out to our soil cousins in those vacation kind of places
We
like
love 'em.
San Juan,
Miami,
Honolulu.
Yeah.
You know, it must be nice for y'all to just be out there like actually living. And then to get to plant there. So your fall planting game is going to have a different vibe. In fact, our resident seed slayer, Stephanie from Seed Mail Seed Co., calls that area the upside down of hardiness zones. You can go tropical in that zone with fruits like bananas and pineapples, or you can keep things fresh with greens like spinach and bok choy. Just be ready to manage those tropical pests. And do not forget, you can also plant some herbs like basil and lemongrass, which thrive in the heat. Just remember that managing pests and heavy rainfall, it can be a bit of a headache, okay? But it is the key to keeping your garden in top shape. A pro tip for our hurricane season warriors, plant as much as you can in containers so that you can move them. They can be mobile, and you can move them to refuge in the case that a hurricane pops up. In that extreme weather, you'll be able to have some kind of influence over just trying to preserve your plants that you worked so hard and had so much patience with growing. And I got this particular tip from the seed slayer as well, as she grows in South Florida.
So from those zones 8 through 13, I've heard the term rich soil.
Oh, yeah.
Would you say that 8 through 13 has rich soil, or only keep that for the vacation spots? Like
That is a great
Honolulu,
question.
Miami, things of that nature.
Thank you for asking that question. I cannot speak on all of those areas in that particular zone, in those zones, that subtropical and tropical zone. But my knowledge of Honolulu, Hawaii in particular, with having the volcanic ash and like the deposits that come from what's happening with the
Minerals,
Yeah.
and all the
brilliant
nutrients.
soil. Like
Yeah.
I've heard the best things. We had a guest, Nick Neighbor, who is currently farming in Hawaii specifically to take advantage of that rich soil. So yeah,
Okay.
but we're going to talk a little bit about soil actually in just a minute.
Okay, perfect.
So now that you know what to plant, let's make sure you're setting yourself up for success, okay, with a few best practices. So the first things first, you called it.
Soil prep.
Tell us about the soil prep.
I mean,
What-
honestly,
what'd
soil
you-
is like the foundation of
Yeah.
all planting, no matter if you're gardening, thinking about indoor plants. It's really like getting your hair done before a big event, making sure that you look proper, having the right foundation. Everything really starts with a good foundation. So you really want to test your soil, amend it with compost or organic matter, and really make sure that it's ready to support your fall crops or that specific plant. And don't forget about mulch. So
Okay.
I know we talked about pests somewhat, but mulch is very important. And it also does have characteristics or chemicals, natural chemicals, that can be natural pest repellents. But mulching is not only one thing that helps retain moisture, but it also really keeps those plants cozy. You know, when good old Jack Frost likes to start nipping at your garden, you want to make sure that you have the right variables to make it through that period. But really, moisture is also a really good variable to make sure you have in your equation as well.
You know this. We're going to talk about watering. And I want to lead with this. I want you to tell us about watering.
Okay.
But I want to lead with this. You don't get to ignore your plant's watering needs in the winter.
No.
Any more than you can stop drinking water
Right.
in the winter. So just think of it that way in case you were a skeptic.
You might have to back off a little bit, but you don't stop.
The temperatures are
Yes.
dropping. So just tell us a little bit about your assessment of how to adjust.
Like I said, no matter indoor or outdoor, as temperatures drop, you might think you can take a break from watering, but you definitely want to think again. You want to adjust your watering schedule and consider drip irrigation or soaker hoses to keep things efficient and your water bill down.
I know that's right.
Because like we said before,
Yeah.
we want you to work smarter, grow, and think smarter and not harder.
Okay. Last but not least, and there's a reason why it's last, pests and diseases, those greedy and uninvited crashers at your garden party. You got to keep an eye out for those common fall pests and handle them as organically as possible whenever possible. And remember that prevention is key. A little extra care now can just save you a lot of trouble later. You know what they say, you got to stay ready so you don't have to get ready, especially when it comes to the pests, okay? And honestly, I despise pests so much that I really don't enjoy talking about them because I be getting triggered. But I love y'all, so let me just tell you about a few fall pests. Just help me out. Give me a little emotional support.
Okay, I'm here for you.
I'll tell you which pests a few pests to watch out for because we don't have all day to get into them all. Cabbage worms. Being the larvae of certain butterflies and moths, these pests chew through leafy greens like cabbage, kale, and broccoli. So, I'm imagining they're healthy, but they are also pesky for that. Next being slugs and snails. These slimy, soft-bodied critters are particularly active in the moist and cool conditions of the fall, feeding on our tender leaves and our seedlings and just
ripping them to shreds.
Not being kind.
Yeah.
Okay, cutworms. These rude caterpillars are known for cutting down young seedlings, the baby seedlings, you know what I'm saying? At the base, just taking them right on down, usually during the night while you're maybe catching up on your favorite fall primetime TV. They outside eating up your stuff. I told y'all. I be getting triggered.
Yes, it's real.
Thank you.
But that's why you got to make sure you, like you said, stay ready. Have the mulch.
Yeah.
Have the pesticides, making sure that you're tending to them. You might have specific areas in your garden that are worse than others. So, you just got to be hands-on.
Yeah. We can't expect it to be perfect. Definitely better to stay ready so you don't have to get ready. And also consider, if you're going to get into gardening, you're getting into nature. There's no nature without bugs. Exactly. If there's no bugs, you're doing something wrong, honestly. So now that we've covered everything from what hardiness zones are to what you should be planting this fall, matching your plants to your zone is not only essential, but it's a gardening cheat code. It's how you unlock the full potential of your garden with ease. We covered a lot.
Yes.
Science words. We talked about perennials, latitude, longitude, but most importantly, we hope that you are feeling empowered to go out in the fall and plant something. I know we tend to think of spring and maybe even summer as the most ideal times to grow things, but we want you to listen to this episode and figure out what you might could grow, even if it's just one thing. If you're not growing anything, one thing would be better than nothing. So now that all of that is said and understood, let's hop into our watering moment.
All right, plant fam, let's take a moment to get deep. Just like the roots of your favorite plants, whether you're from the sunny vibes of Florida like Cola or the cool breezes of Ohio like myself. The truth is, life like gardening or being a plant parent thrives when we understand our environment, where we thrive, how we like to water, and be poured back into by what we choose to have within our environments. Just like knowing your zone can make or break your garden, understanding the climate of your life can make all the difference. So just think about this one thing. When you know what you're dealing with or what's in front of you, whether it's the heat of a Florida summer or the chill of an Ohio fall, you can adjust your approach. Just like you adjust your watering schedule, moving your plants inside or outside. It's not just about location. Yeah, we talked about latitude and longitude, but really the key, it's about timing, knowing when to protect your growth and when to let it flourish in the open air. And just like how climate change is shaking up our zones, life will throw you some curveballs, some unexpected changes. But here is the key. No matter where you are, what zone you're in, or what's happening around you, these three things, soil, humidity, and water, are your constants. Your plants need their essentials, and so do you. So keep nourishing your roots, stay grounded, and adapt when you need to. Because thriving isn't just about surviving. It's about blooming right where you're planted. So whether you're prepping your soil, adjusting your watering, or fending off life's pests, remember this. You've got everything you need to grow smart, not hard. Stay rooted, stay resilient, and keep thriving, Plant Fam. And as always, plant more and worry less. Plant Zaddy out.
So I want to thank you all for tuning into Black in the Garden. Make sure you are subscribing, leaving nice reviews. Be honest, but be nice. And follow us on social media for more real-time updates, events, and community. Don't be shy, y'all. Say something to us.
Okay, because we're a family.
Period.
Love like soil, we're reaping good deeds, enjoying all the spoils. Rooted in the land way back when it started, when we were black in the garden.
Black like the root of my hair, from the top of my head to the soles of my feet. Hey, yeah, black like the root of my hair. I'ma go what I eat in the garden where I be, yeah, be.
WABE.